Animal Crossing. Hello world, my name is Dan Nominator, welcome to 2026, and congratulations. Why? Well, you made it to the party, of course. It's been over a year since Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete released, and you know what that means, a birthday party. And we are the only ones who showed up. Seeing as I was one of the few people to go in depth with extensive coverage about the game when it first released, I thought it'd be kinda interesting to do a brief retrospective on how the app has grown and changed over the past year. And to be fair, it isn't that much, but I've also been playing it pretty frequently, with a couple of breaks every now and then, so I feel like this is a pretty good time to just briefly go over my thoughts on how the game has aged so far. Now, this is probably the only time I'm going to do this, but I do think it's kind of worth doing because, again, this is the first time Nintendo's preserved a game of this form before, and like I was saying in the previous video, I would love this kind of preservation to extend to other Nintendo apps like Mario Kart Tour, and maybe even a couple of the games that were killed off in the past, like Dr. Mario World, Dragalia Lost, pretty much just those two. But I know the question you all have on your minds first, so let's get the obvious thing out of the way here. Do I think, after playing this game for a year, that Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete is worth $20? No. The party's over. It's time to call it a day. Yes, I'm sorry to say that while I've gotten a fair amount of usage out of Animal Crossing Pocket Camp Complete, or as I'm going to call it from now on, Pocket Camp Complete, I really do not think this game is worth 20 bucks. $10 at most, and Nintendo knew that when they initially sold the app, as I mentioned before. They sold it at $10, and while I might think that is a little bit steep when it comes to the general landscape of the app stores, this is Nintendo we're talking about. They have a little tax involved. And 10 bucks, all things considered, for a game where you could transfer potentially years of data over, yeah, I guess that makes enough sense. But as soon as that promotional period ended and the game went up to $20, I'm sorry, the whole worth of this thing went out the window. And that sucks because the game, honestly, from what I heard, sold pretty well. It was actually a chart topper in both the Play Store and the App Store for a while there. I will never understand why Nintendo went back on such a decent price, especially when it comes to App Store stuff. FL Studio Mobile or LumaFusion, those kinds of apps are around $20 to $30, and even those still kind of feel expensive to me personally, but at the very least, they're designed around productivity. This is a $20 game on an App Store, and it really sucks to me that Nintendo kind of sabotaged the success of their own game because I feel like it could have stayed a chart topper for much longer if they just kept the $10 price tag. But now that we have that caveat out of the way, let's talk about my past year with Pocket Camp Complete. So the first thing I feel I should mention is that I never really intended on playing the game daily like I used to with the original Pocket Camp for that 2 or so month period. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I didn't. As I said before, the app is a lot more welcoming now, and it doesn't make you feel like you're missing something unless you're, I guess, starting the game at the very end of the month, because there's stuff happening every month within the game, and the months are actually split up into thirds now for the most part. So the first third of the month will involve a gardening event, the second third of the month is a fishing tourney, and the third part of the month is usually gyroid scavenger hunting, which is basically just finding and picking up items around your campsite and the various areas in the game. So each third of the month has something going on, but that gives you about 10 or so days to mess around if you want to, and you don't have to do all of this stuff all of the time. Actually, because of the Camp Caretaker system, which is now free when you buy the game, you can actually get a lot of this stuff pretty easily. The Camp Caretaker does sort of break the game a little bit, but not in a bad way. And again, it's optional, so while they can easily collect a lot of items for you, like the gyroids, catch some fish, and even get different flower seeds and stuff to help with basically every kind of event in the game, none of it's required, and you can always turn off the Camp Caretaker if you don't want to have this idle simulator mode on at all times, which is something that, as a person who actually likes to play video games, I really appreciate. But I will say I left the Camp Caretaker on for a pretty long time. Alfonso who was like my best friend in the original Pocket Camp, because if you got his friendship level to a certain level, he would give you a train set to build as a craftable item. So Alfonso and I got along for a long time. I kept him as my caretaker for almost an entire year, and now his level of friendship is completely maxed out, so I don't know if that tells you how much this game is willing to reward you just having something like that on. And Alfonso was pretty helpful to me over the course of this past year. He was gathering items for me and allowing certain events to be a little easier, so I never felt that I had to invest too much time into any of these events. Even though I did enjoy popping in and, you know, growing some flowers, catching some fish, finding some gyroids. Again, the game doesn't force you to do any of this, and I feel like that's honestly its best quality. Speaking of which, another big quality of life feature that has completely broken in the game is the leaf token system. I have over 10,000 of these things now, but I don't consider that to be a bad thing either. One thing I neglected to mention in the original video is that when Pocket Camp Complete launched, a new set of goals was listed alongside the rest of the goals in the game. These were essentially long-term stretch goals that would give you a lot of leaf tokens and other resources, and because I'd been playing the game pretty consistently for a few months, by the time my data was transferred over, I'd completed basically every single one of them. I think I had about 10 or so more goals from Isabelle to complete after I started Pocket Camp Complete, but I finished them pretty quickly as well. So these are actually really rewarding for players who had their save data transferred over. It was like a short-term reward to thank them for all of their hours playing the game online, which, I mean, it doesn't make up for the extreme prices of stuff based on leaf tickets, but at the very least, it was something. The bells system is completely broken now too. Oh my goodness, if you have a camp caretaker on, they will collect the max amount of items for you very quickly, which means if you can't hold any of those items, they're converted to bells automatically, and I have no idea how many I have now because the game counter maxes out at 9 million, so I have no idea how much I have now. But again, this isn't something you have to do, and either way, I see it as a win because it makes things so much easier for new players to get the items they want a lot sooner. It also helps that these items cost way less leaf tokens than they did tickets, so I have gotten to actually spend a lot of time creating campsites that I wanted to. And that's actually something I wanted to touch on too. I didn't actually spend a lot of time customizing my campsite at first in the original Pocket Camp because having multiple saved sets of campsites was originally a subscription feature. I'm not joking. So you only had one campsite in the original version of the game unless you paid money monthly, which I'm sorry, that's really bad. I think it was around the last month of the original game that I started really working on my campsite, and I started collecting a lot of railroad themed items to essentially have a railroad park for my campsite. And I honestly think it came together kind of nicely. It is obviously a hodgepodge of different items, and none of them are themed even remotely close to each other. But I think my favorite thing about this part of the game is how it forced me to think creatively a little bit. I think sometime in the fall there was a biking fishing tourney, so every time you caught fish, you would get a bunch of items based on trails and biking and such like that. So what I ended up doing is, because there had also been a cookie with a floating train as one of the rewards, I saved up my leaf tickets, eventually got the engine that I wanted, and then put it sitting above the bike path. And it's a floating train, so it doesn't need rails. So that's how I themed my campsite, with this floating train going up and down the rails, and every now and then, I would just move the train along the campsite and put it somewhere else. I feel like this is kind of an interesting thing to talk about because Pocket Camp has a pretty decent customization system. Of course, you can't put items on different levels, you can only stack a few on top of each other. It's not as open of a customizable game as New Horizons, but it also takes way less time to move items, so I found myself getting pretty creative with how I wanted to mess with my campsite. But then, when the saved sets came into play along with the items I'd been collecting in Pocket Camp Complete, this is where I started having a lot of fun with the game. I created a Sakura-themed Cherry Blossom train station. I created a Winter Wonderland. There were so many new ideas I had for campsites now, and every now and then I'll start up a new one, and I don't necessarily tend to finish every single one of them, But just having this as an option is so nice because you can boot up the game another day and switch your campsite just for a totally different look. It's all aesthetics, obviously, but I don't necessarily mind that. I feel like this game is meant to be chill. It's meant to give you a little bit of creativity to work with, and it's really just those two things that really matter to me personally. You're doing all of the menial tasks like fishing, catching bugs, and picking fruit and stuff like that, which can be fun in its own right when you give those things over to animals and they reward you for it. But overall, the creativity aspect of the game is what works the most for me. So I'm really glad to see that that's been more rewarded in this new version of the game. And again, I still cannot believe these things were subscription-based back in the day. That must have been horrible for people who wanted to save multiple campsites. I actually don't know if the people who stopped paying monthly lost those campsite slots or if they just were locked away until you started paying again, but either way, I am so glad that this is included in the game now. Another thing I'm surprised I still do is play the game with a stylus. I still have my S23 Ultra, so I still have the S Pen laying around, and I mean, I probably would have done this on my Moto G stylus as well back in the day, but this just feels so natural. I don't know why I like it so much. I think it just really hammers in this idea that Pocket Camp has way better controls for a lot of things than New Horizons does. Being able to pick up and drag furniture, and a couple of other things I think that just make a lot of sense with a phone game like this. For instance, tapping anywhere on the screen to catch a fish, or picking up flowers with the touchscreen. All of this works together really well, and I'm not sure how much of it is a thing that was already established in New Leaf because I actually haven't played that game, and at some point I really do want to, but a lot of this feels intuitive, and I'm kind of surprised how well Animal Crossing transfers to a phone game, even though I would probably prefer the next game, if it is still on a Nintendo console with a touchscreen, to have way better touch support, and I mean, we are getting a New Horizons update pretty soon, so I guess they could add it, but I doubt it. I really hope that they take some lessons from Pocket Camp, and maybe a few from New Horizons, to make the game more intuitive to control, especially when it comes to placing items outside. Oh my goodness, I got so tired of having to move things around inch by inch in New Horizons. I know you can pick stuff up and put it away and put it in your storage, but the Pocket Camp system is just so much easier in my opinion. It makes everything so comfortable to do, and it makes the game a lot cozier because you don't have to, I don't know, touch some arrows on the screen and slowly inch things along the map. That's what I feel like New Horizons makes me do. Something I think I also neglected to mention in the previous video is that the game actually got a slight resolution bump in this version. It's still 30 FPS, but I don't mind that because this is meant to be a chill game and I don't want it to use a lot of my phone battery. So 30 FPS is totally fine. I don't care about that sort of thing as long as it's stable, and for the most part, Pocket Camp is. And it really does show in the new location, Whistle Pass. This is where all of your friends gather and you can talk to them once per day. They'll help you enter the quarry, and one per day, I believe, will give you a couple of extra items and stuff for checking in with them. Not that it connects to the internet and does anything otherwise, but this is a really cute location, and it is nice to have a KK concert every night, even though I honestly don't generally play the game around this time, so I tend to miss all of them, but whatever. It's just nice to have this as an option, and the fact that they even bothered adding a new location when really all they had to do was port the game, I think that does signify they wanted to at least put a little effort into preserving some of the features that were being lost, even though I've really only met a few other Pocket Camp players and exchanged the friend cards with them, so to be honest, it's kind of an up and down, but at the very least, I'm glad that they added something for us to do to compare stuff with friends. I still do find it a bit of a shame that you can't exchange campsites with one another. I would love to visit my friends' campsites, or at least download a version to occasionally check out. You just can't do that here, so you really only get to see the list of your friends, and I mean, that's cool, I guess, but I can't really interact with most of these people anymore. I've met most of them online, so I don't know, kind of a pointless feature, but at the very least, Whistle Pass is still very cute. The only other thing I'll really mention is the internet connection. This was a big sticking point with my original video, and I'm happy to say for the most part, the game doesn't require Wi-Fi or data or anything. I think a few times I've launched it, the game did mention that there was a patch or an update or something, and I mean, you can skip it if you want to, but I just got it over with briefly and I haven't had any issues since. And for the most part, this is actually really convenient. Being able to play a mobile game like this offline, which is becoming a surprising rarity nowadays, is pretty nice when you're in a grocery store and sitting in line and the metal ceilings disrupt every form of connection you can think of. So yeah, I'm one of those people. I know, sometimes you're just bored, what can I say? But being able to play this kind of game, whether or not you have a good connection, is certainly nice. And again, if I'm doing that, I'm not playing it because I feel I have to or I'm about to miss an event. It's just a nice convenience to have. Imagine that, modern technology being actually convenient, right? And yeah, I think that's all I actually had to say about Pocket Camp Complete. It's just a really good version of this game. I just wish the price wasn't holding it back, but from what I understand, the game hasn't actually gone on sale ever since it launched and hit that price jump, so I guess it's just a $20 game forever, which really does sour the experience a little bit, but otherwise, this is a pretty good first preservation effort from Nintendo. Now, if they do this again, and they also make something like Mario Kart Tour $20 when both 8 Deluxe and World are now out, yeah, I wouldn't expect a lot of sales to come from that. But it could also be that because Mario Kart is a long-running series and they've always got something new on the horizon, I guess it's possible we might not see any more of Nintendo's apps get this kind of treatment. From what I understand, the Stop Killing Games movement is no longer currently moving forward, which is disappointing, but at the very least, it's gotten a lot of developers to notice how important it is to make sure that you have a backup plan if your game ever has to go offline. So even though there are still some negatives to these kinds of games shutting down, maybe it's not so bad after all. If more companies start doing what Nintendo did with Pocket Camp, I don't know, things might turn out okay. But now it's time to start looking forward, because as you know, it's a brand new year, I've got a bunch of new video ideas, a brand new desk, and a bunch of current projects to finish, so I guess I better get myself to work. Until my next video then, this is Dan Ominator signing off. See you later, Ominators, and party on! I think the animals might be cross at me.